So getting started on the sort of let go and begin trail is this. So yesterday I'm on Substack. I'm doing our note for Substack, and I follow this guy called Weirdo Poetry, and he does illustrations that go along with his art, his poems, and they're lovely, and he's lovely, and he's going live with this other woman who is a philosopher and talks about a lot about metaphysics and stuff, and they're interviewing each other basically, or having a conversation. So I put it on while I'm doing other things,
Mm.
and I just had this moment where I was like, oh, they're talking about creativity, obviously.
Yeah.
And he starts talking about caretaking as a creative act.
Oh,
Yeah. And one of our community members had DM'd me and sent me like a post about how homemaking is a creative act. Like every day you are inventing systems, you're inventing dinner, you're creating these things out of
yeah,
thin
I need
air,
to hear
a
that. Yeah.
home. You're creating a home out of thin air, and that in itself is a creative act. And then but then the irony or the interesting thing about the conversation I listened to yesterday was that he is a stay-at-home dad. So
Wow.
he's been the primary caretaker for his family for the last 15 years. He's at home. He's the one who does the meals and the drop-offs and the pickups, and his wife works outside of the home. And he's, he said, I'm working. I'm an illustrator and I do, you know, artistic work. He's a creative, but he said, but I'm really the primary caretaker. That's really my fundamental job. And I was sitting there thinking about how creativity plays into that every single day, and how we don't sort of think of caretaking as a creative act,
Yeah.
because we think of it as chores, we think of it as maintaining, budgeting, we think of it as all of these sort of not very sexy things. and
Right.
and we always think of creativity as this like kind of like euphoric magical experience, and he said, and it's both, and right, was
Right.
kind of his argument, and he doesn't use those words, I'm using those words on top of what he said. But he talks about how solving problems for kids is a very, you have to come up with creative solutions all the time, and so your brain is always tapped into that, and how possibly these sort of magical moments you create for your children, even up to like their teenage and even early adulthood years, these sort of things like dinner on the table every night, is a creative act. And how you get them to stop fighting can be creative. Like you come up with a new game, or you come
Yeah.
up with a new way of doing things. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this. It kind of stopped me in my tracks. I was doing something else, because I was sitting there
Yeah.
thinking like, oh, it's one more example of how when something is feminized, like embroidery, pottery, needlepoint, quilting, homemaking, it's then marginalized as not as important a creative act or essential a creative act as the painting, singing, musicianship, writing is, because those have been predominantly shown to us through the male lens. and
Right.
and so and I think it's changing, of course, and I think social media is a big reason why it's changing. I think the sort of romanticizing the home life that we're seeing right now all over social
Mhm.
media is part of that. But I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, this is a dude talking about it, and is that
Right.
why it like captured my
Right.
attention in a way?
Right.
Isn't that fascinating? And
Yeah, that's fascinating.
yeah,
I saw an interview with Aretha Franklin
Franklin.
from did you see this one? And
No.
the interviewer is like, what is the most challenging part of your life? Like what are the challenges, like the biggest challenge that you face? And she like took a pause and she was like, what to make for dinner? And he was like, no, like really, like, so blah blah blah. And he's like, you don't do your own. She's like, I do my own laundry, my own ironing, my own washing. I do my
Wow.
own cooking. And she said it again, and she's like, making what to make for dinner. I think about what I made last. I'm like, I already made that last night, and then
Yep.
what should I make tonight? And I was just like, this, and it
Yeah.
really to anything like we talk about time, space, intention, anything you do with intention. So if what you're doing a lot of is caretaking, you can turn know that that is creative and how you can see it through that lens, and maybe it'll even feel a bit more validating and fulfilling.